Nobody lives in a global climate. You live in the climate of Sydney. You're worried, rightly, about the climate of Sydney if you're worried about climate at all. Whether there's more or less ice in the Arctic Ocean is quite simply irrelevant to you. So that's the first point to bear in mind. The second point to bear in mind is that I already spoke earlier of the difference between weather and climate, and it's defined as climate is 30 years of weather. So climate's the longer term thing, weather's a shorter term thing. Well, that's fine. That's a useful statistical technique for us to use to analyse data as scientists. But nature doesn't notice. Nature doesn't know anything about the difference between weather and climate. The processes of weather, precipitation, pressure, wind, are the same as the processes of climate. And in fact, an event like a major cyclone in North Queensland or the bushfires in Victoria, which were dramatic natural hazard events in Australia recently, on the one hand you'll say they're weather events, but they're just as surely climatic events. So there's a sense, and a very real and important sense, in which there's no difference between weather and climate. The processes are common. That was a mistake, excuse me. The processes are common, and they range from processes that act in milliseconds, which is the formation of ice crystals in clouds, to millions of years, which is the drifting of continents away from one another, opening up a new seaway through which the ocean then flows, and the ocean transports most of the heat on the planet. So climate and weather processes are a complete spectrum, and they are common to both weather and climate. Nobody lives in a world climate. New Zealand has an agency. Oh, sorry, let me start. If you live in Australia, the biggest natural hazards are indeed cyclones and bushfires. There is virtually no chance of a volcanic eruption in Australia. There's a very small chance of a significant earthquake. You remember Newcastle's had one, Western Australia's had one too, but they're very small earthquakes compared with what happens in Japan, San Francisco, Wellington, New Zealand. So the major hazards in Australia, as it happens, because of the particular spot we live on the globe, are weather-related hazards. If you live in New Zealand, it's very different. The biggest hazards are earthquakes and volcanoes. They also have storms, they also have bushfires, and the government there should worry about that. But the biggest hazard in terms of loss of life and damage to property, if one happens, are earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Okay, horses for courses. What's the sovereign duty of a government? The sovereign duty of a government is to protect its people and its borders. That's its number one, and that's one of the reasons this immigration debate is so hot and has been in the public domain at the moment. But beyond that, it's protecting its people from natural hazard to the best of its ability. It's very clear from the commission we're having into the Victorian bushfires, which is the latest in a long series of commissions into similar disasters, that we do not handle natural hazard well. We don't prepare for it well enough, and we don't react to it and adapt to it when it happens well enough. And the Royal Commission will undoubtedly make recommendations to improve that. Now, we might have the best cricket team, but they've certainly got the best rugby union team. And it happens that New Zealand also has the world's best practice management agency for natural hazard. It's called GeoNet. And it's charged with advising the public and with advising the government on developing natural hazards. And there are 9 hazards listed, and obviously volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis are 3. The other 6 are all climate-related hazards. There's storms, there's sea level rise, and I can't remember them, but they're climate-related. The appropriate way to deal with climate change, which is certain to happen in the future, because it's always happened in the past, natural climate change, is to be better prepared for it. So we adapt for it as it happens. We don't know in advance whether 2020, that's only 10 years away, we don't know in advance whether it will be warmer than today or cooler than today. The appropriate thing to do is to react to any developing temperature trend as it causes drought, as it causes flood, and so on and so forth. So Plan B is preparing for and adapting to all climate change as it happens. Now the key point about Plan B is it's truly precautionary, because it takes precautions against things we know will happen, natural climate change, and it will also deal with any human-caused change if it happens to occur. It hasn't yet, that doesn't mean that it won't, ever, because we all know, scientists all know, there is an effect at global level. If that effect were to prove to be big enough to be deleterious, we're already prepared to deal with it because we've prepared for the much bigger range of natural climate hazard. Some but not all of you can see the two posters on the wall with a picture of a book with an iceberg and some blue sea. The book is called Climate, the Counter Consensus. It's by a North Queensland geologist called Professor Bob Carter, and it was published in London 2 months ago. I'm afraid that because the first edition sold out from pre-sales on Amazon UK, there are no copies in the Australian bookshops and will not be until August and probably September. In the meantime, that book is available through Amazon UK, and even paying the postage, you will get it here quicker and cheaper than waiting for a copy in the Australian bookshops. I don't say that with pleasure. I'd much rather you bought it in the bookshop, but it's not there. Why do I draw your attention to that, apart from my natural immodesty? It is because the structure of the talk I have given you tonight is precisely the structure of that book. It's divided into 4 parts: the science reality, the virtual reality, the socio-political pathology, and Plan B, the way forward. And I do commend it to you if you're interested in learning more about this. I will finish and take questions if there's time with one last quotation. It comes from a lady who will be known to many of you. She's one of Sydney's better known writers and commentators, called Shelley Gare. And I'm paraphrasing something she said about creationism, as it happens, which in this context is probably quite an interesting thing. She said, once truth has been mugged and robbed of its rightful value, it's just about getting out cudgels, flexing the biceps, and seeing who has the loudest voice to decide who or what is right or wrong. So the gentleman in the middle of the floor, that's how you do it. You judge who has the biggest voice. In this battle, don't be surprised if the warming alarmists and their like turn out to have the most powerful muscles. They certainly do at the moment. It's not about who is really right any longer, but who is enough in the ascendancy to be able to insist, if they want, that yes, the moon is indeed made of green cheese. Thank you very much.